Oh my god, that was great. Yes. Okay. Skins season 2. This show is just so good. It's really fucking good. I loved season 1. Thought it was just amazing. I think season 2 is on par with season 1, but it is more complicated and surprisingly esoteric. This might be the most esoteric teen show I've ever seen. There are some fascinating things going on in the second season of Skins UK, and I would really love to highlight 3 of the episodes that I think are the most affecting, even puzzling, and the 3 episodes where the show attained truly high art. I It's such a great postmodern television show. It really is. I am a true believer in Skins. So I think the best episode of this season is called Effie. That's the one that excites me the most. And good for you, Effie, as a character. She had my favorite episode of the first season, and now same with season 2. She is incredible. She's an awesome character. She's a great character, or at the very least, she's a character who really inspires the writers to do demonstrations of my favorite stuff in art, man, which is postmodern teen drama. And I really love it when on certain shows like Gossip Girl, you get these characters who, and Gossip Girl was running at the same exact time as Skins, and Gossip Girl is my favorite work of art ever. That's not really important, but it's at least interesting to consider when talking about these 2000s teen dramas that play with nihilism, hedonism, and narrative systems. But in Gossip Girl, you'd have these characters who would openly fix narratives or alter narratives, create narratives, because gossip is all about narrative. That's the entire point of Gossip Girl. In Skins UK, the episode Effie is determined to sort out the fucking soap opera that Skins had become. We see her go out of her way to play and manipulate with a narrative system. So we see her go out of her way to try to, at that point, it's about getting Sid back together with Cassie, and it's about getting Tony back together with Michelle, and getting Sid and Tony to be besties again. And she figures out how to do that by like this deep game of manipulation. And by a deep game of manipulation, sure, it's kind of reminiscent of Tony, but Tony was never this kind of postmodern about it or this open about it. Effie is outright designing narrative systems and imposing them upon the other characters, and watching the cogs move in the machine, and the soap opera is sorted out by Effie. The part I am getting overexcited, but it was so fucking cool, dude. It was so fucking great. The very last moment of the episode, she's like sitting on her bed reading a book, and she looks at the camera and gives a nice cheeky smile. Like, she did it for us, man. She fixed the narrative system for us, the viewer. And she has great conversations throughout that episode about art, about the emotion of art. One of the reasons why she's helping all these characters necessarily complete their arc for the soap opera to be effective. The deal she made is that Sid would do her own art project. Well, meanwhile, she completed the most postmodern art project of all, which is play with the fabric and the framework of the very show that the audience is watching. And when she goes to hand in her assignment, her art assignment, she's like, "Well, I do have it. It's just not what you think it is. I made art about like wrath and love and hatred and spite and excitement, but it's everywhere. It's all around you. It's everything. I created this narrative system that we're in, is essentially what she's saying. And it truly makes sense, and the audience is confronted with this kind of sweet sort of postmodern clarity when she looks and smiles into the camera at the end of like, You're my audience. You're my audience. You see what I've done. Effie is one of the greatest postmodern brats of all time. I have this kind of character that I that I made up in my head of a postmodern brat. You know, Abby Morgan on Dawson's Creek, Georgina Sparks in Gossip Girl, even Klaus in The Vampire Diaries. Teen dramas will often feature a postmodern brat who can do two things: reject the narrative itself, or wield it, use it, fix it, sort it out, solve it, create narratives, fix the show when the show isn't fixing itself, when the characters are too unable to complete their arcs. The postmodern brat will step in and do it for them, which is exactly what Effie did through that episode. uh, Dude, she's so cool. She's fucking awesome. The Effie episode is amazing. It's my favorite episode of season 2, because like we see this character directly interacting with the narrative systems themselves and solving them and fixing them. And in a show that can be as nihilistic and hedonistic as Skins, the fact that Effie fixes them for good, I think, speaks volumes about this kind of secret sensitivity within her character, about how perhaps she appreciates the art that is the lived experience of your teenage years. And the fact that she looked at me, at us, at the very end of the episode, like, you're welcome. I know I did it well. Like, it's so good. It's so good. Like, dude, fuck you, man. That's so amazing. Another episode that is fascinating is Tony's episode. Now, Tony, at the very end of season 1, he was struck by a bus after telling Michelle that he loved her. It was like he grew a conscience and then was immediately hit by a bus directly afterwards as punishment from the nihilistic universe itself. Like cosmic punishment. And he starts this season essentially lobotomized. Uh, he is almost emotionally unrecognizable from the Tony that we knew in season 1. He is absolutely more likable, although, you know, if you remember correctly, he was my favorite character in the first season. I think that Effie is my favorite character now, based on the fact that I think she knows she's a character. Like, that's so cool to me. None of the other characters do, but Tony's been lobotomized by meaning. You know, he's a nihilist who was, and at the end of the first season, was overwhelmed by pure meaning, and the pure meaning was too much, essentially, and he was lobotomized by meaning, by meaning itself. Fuck, that's complicated, and it's really sad seeing what's going on with him, especially knowing how far his character went at the very end of last season. Like, this functioning sociopath uh, grew a heart. I mean, I think that's pretty incredible. The nihilism was scared out of him at the end of the first season. But now we're dealing with this kind of like lobotomized version of the teenage psychopath. And the episode Tony, oh my God, fucking eat your heart out, Sopranos. Like, this shit, dude. It's like 90% entirely made up in his head, and it's symbolic and it's archetypal. It's fucking almost dream logic in a sense. It's so powerful. It's so crazy. It's crazy. I could probably be here for 2 hours analyzing just the episode Tony. Like, there's so much poetry and like metaphorical value to that episode. There's so much poetry to that episode, the deepness of it. But I'm gonna focus on like the main part of it. It begins with Tony at the club, and he and Cassie are watching Michelle and Sid, who are now together. And they're kind of scheming, conspiring together against them. Cassie doses him up, gives him he gives him some drugs. And then the next thing I believe that we see is Tony leaving to go for an interview to university, and his sister says good luck, like you can do anything. His sister Effie. And on the train, he has all this weird shit. In the bathroom, he meets this like mysterious brunette girl, and that mysterious brunette girl reappears at the college and is clearly acting like someone who is both real and unreal, with one foot in reality and one foot in like the subconscious reality that we all share in a very large way. Um, this dark-haired girl kind of gets Tony to be reacquainted with his sociopathic, earlier hedonistic version of himself. Like they hang out in this uh, dorm with these two kind of gay stoners, and she gets a tattoo. Like they have sex there, and that was a huge thing for Tony because Tony's dick wasn't working since the accident rearranged his brain. And at the very end of the episode, he turns around and you see a tattoo on his back, and like it's very clear. It's very clear that nothing happened. That was all in Tony's head. It was all metaphorical and stuff like that. So let's focus on the obvious meanings of it, because you can analyze the esoteric imagery, the esoteric like dialogue of it for a very long time. But it's largely about Tony reconnecting with the earlier version of himself, or that eternal part of himself, being the animus, being his wrath, being his animal, being that which propels him forward, or like that undying part of him. Like there is an undying nihilist within Tony that he needs to reconnect with in order to operate at all within the ultra modern universe, which is very, very cold and calculating. And yes, this mystery, like sexy brunette figure, is highly symbolic of his own animus. Like he'd be the masculine version of her psyche, and like she's a feminine part of his, and he needs to reconnect with that. But that girl gets more and more interesting because I do feel like she is Effie coded in a very large way, and like Effie's the last person that we see before he goes to college. I mean, but at that point he's tripping anyway. He's on a trip. He's on drugs anyway, hallucinating. But Effie is very, very um Tony coded, similar to this mystery brunette. That they act in a lot of the same way. They seem to have, I think, similar speech patterns, and their behavior mirrors each other. And I would have to call, now that I've got to know Effie like a little bit more. Like she has taken the mantle of Tony, not simply as my favorite character, but also as the show's kind of resident nihilist. But she's also a sweetheart at the same time. Like Effie is the feminine part of nihilism, whereas Tony is the masculine part, and those parts would have to reunite. And like the first thing that Burnett ever says to him is because Tony's having a panic attack in the club bathroom, and she's like, "Do you want to fuck your sister? Because that's what they say panic attacks come from." She's just like talking shit when we first see her, which is super reminiscent of the show's darkest moment still to date, where Tony is trying to save his sister from Josh in this crazy kind of haunted house club party, and Josh is like, "I'll only let your sister go," who was like overdosing at that point and desperately needed medical attention. "I'll only let her go if you fuck her. You have to fuck your sister, or else she's not going anywhere." It's reminiscent of that, and that's the point that broke Tony's nihilistic brain, right? Like that's the point that scared the nihilism out of Tony. And through this trip, in a kind of Jungian sort of way, like he's able to fuck his sister's double, which is truly the feminine part of his personality, of his psyche, and become a whole Tony again as he leaves. That's one way of looking at the woman, but there's something to be said about Cassie, because Cassie is the one who gave him the drugs. And you can absolutely say that the two stoners who they hang out with for a long time, the kind of possibly gay ones, they're kind of shadows, or maybe they literally are the two gay guys in Scotland that Cassie was hanging out with when she was in Scotland for the first half of season 2, which would make this mystery brunette not be a mystery brunette at all, but an undercover blonde. Like, it'd be Cassie, because Cassie did give him the pills. And I'm fairly certain that it's Cassie's voice at the very end. Like, when they finally say their goodbyes, she says, "Don't look back." And I think it's Cassie's voice saying, "Don't look back." Right, and I think that's cool. I think that's another cool layer of reading it. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to read an episode like Tony's in season 2. But the sister thing is way more interesting to me, especially when the episode, the foundation of it is built upon Effie reading Orpheus, the Greek myth, to Tony, which is all about not looking back, or else she will turn to stone. Not looking back at your wife, or else she will turn to stone. And that kind of feeds into my own personal reading of it, as this brunette was certainly Effie coded. I'm not saying it was absolutely Effie. I'm not saying that Tony even wants to fuck his sister. This is like highly symbolic. This is we are dealing with metaphors. We're dealing with the esoteric kind of quality of postmodern teen drama here. And the fact that when he finally leaves the brunette, the mystery brunette, she says, "Don't look back." And if he did, she would have turned to stone. He would have lost the feminine part of himself. He would have lost the femininity of nihilism itself. And also, it could be that this mystery brunette is his sexual impulse, is his sexual wants, desires, his sex drive itself, his sexual fantasies. That could absolutely be what the mystery brunette is symbolic of. She's also symbolic of nihilism. I think that it might be saying that, like, a man without a sex drive, a man without nihilism is half a person, is half a psyche. And that you have to be, at least in part, nihilistic to want to fuck someone so with such animalism, with such impassioned ferociousness. After that episode, Tony is fuller, and he's almost back to like a well-adjusted version of Tony. He's almost back to what would have happened possibly if that bus didn't hit him, like a Tony with growth. That episode's very interesting, and there's like a lot of different. Every single scene, has such a great amount of meaning applied to it. You can spend a lot of time with an episode like Tony. I was shocked by Tony. I was shocked by this. Oh my god, deeply layered episode of teen drama. Like, that's an episode that should be hailed, heralded as one of the most fascinating pieces of teen television ever. Yeah, because it is. I think that the Effie episode, which directly follows Tony, is a lot better because it's so much more fun, and I'm turned on more when I see characters actually playing with the narrative itself, and like knowingly doing so. And Effie being this amazing, she turns into the Shakespeare of the show in that episode. She's so cool. She becomes the author of Skins, kind of takes it away from the writers, takes it away from the framework itself, and like, fuck the fourth wall. Right? I'm gonna break the fourth wall with a smile, says Effie, with a demure little smile, with a cheeky one, with a really cute and sweet one. I'm gonna break the fourth wall with a smile, and by breaking the fourth wall, I fix the narrative itself. Wow. The other episode I think is excellent and deserves to be talked about is Cassie's. Oh, I don't want to talk about a certain part of it because it's so fucking sad, dude. Yeah, thanks Skins for making me cry. Chris dies in the Cassie episode. Now, curiously, that's not even the most interesting thing about the Cassie episode, but Chris made me cry. He's so sad, man. He's so he's equal parts pathetic and just constantly astonishes me by how free and funny he is, right? The pathos is unreal with Chris. And I loved Chris and Jal. That's the best couple on the show. Hands down. Better than Tony and Michelle, better than Cassie and Sid. It's this, man. It's Jal. It's Jal and Chris. Like, that got to me. Chris got to me so hard. and killing him with like a brain hemorrhage. Oh man, you made him such a sad character, and then you had him. He had this unfortunately unremarkable boy die in a most unremarkable way. Like, fuck, dude. That's so sad. But okay, but before I go into that, I'll talk about all the other characters briefly. I just want to kind of spend time on these 3 episodes because they were so transformative for me. Um, in the Cassie episode, after it gets interesting after Chris dies, and like he dies in Cassie's arms, right? So like she's right. It's very traumatic for her, and she runs away to New York City immediately following it. And in New York City, she meets this guy called Adam. They go around town. She stays at his apartment. He has pictures on the wall of who you can only assume is his ex-girlfriend, who either doesn't want to see him anymore or has died. And now that Skins has introduced the Tony episode and then the Effie episode, which plays with like what is real and what isn't real, like can characters take control of narratives, or are the characters just at the mercy of narratives? Effie is not at the mercy of narratives. Effie creates the narratives. She dominates the narratives, right? So like we have a different way of viewing the situation, and like immediately you're like, is Adam real? You know, is Adam real? Is Adam unreal? Is this entire thing a fever dream? You know, and she is in New York City, and Adam is like likely real, but Adam has a lot of symbolism applied to him. In the very last moments of Cassie's episode, he leaves. There's like a note on the bed with an apple on top of it to keep it from falling off, and she reads the note, and if you're really morbid, you can read his note as a suicide note, as a suicide letter. Um, he's basically saying, I'm going away for a while, but you can stay here as long as you like. Like, I had some things I had to do, that sort of thing. But when he left, he turned all of the pictures of his ex around, like to face the wall after Cassie had moved them to kind of be outward facing them. And she starts to cry as she takes a bite of the apple. Now, this means a lot of different things. This is such a powerful moment, right? The apple, I don't think we should get hung up on Adam and the apple. Like, we shouldn't be too biblical about it. You can be biblical about it if you want. Like I said, there's no right or wrong way to view these um, more intuitive parts of Skins. And I think that Skins is really cool in the idea that it is surprisingly so intuitive. The meaning is intuited, and I think that's really nice. You know, it's about intuition, a sort of postmodern intuition, which I've never truly seen before. So this is really cool. She eats the apple, and when I say eat and Cassie in the same sentence, that should be really powerful, right? The fact that she's eating, you know, because she's a character who has that severe mental illness, and she doesn't like to eat. She doesn't like to eat, but she's eating the apple. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Europeans, maybe English people will view the apple more biblically than I will. But when a character in New York City leaves an apple for a character, I think of the Big Apple. And when she takes a bite out of it, she's taking a bite out of the Big Apple, and she's incredibly lonely. And her friend just died in her fucking arms. And the fact that she's eating into the Big Apple means I think she is settling there. Like, she's staying there. And not just there in the Big Apple, but there in that emotional state, that pathetically desperate one that we see at the very end of the episode where she's crying. You know, I think that that's what it's highly um meant to represent. And since we're dealing with a show that, just like in the Tony episode, we had a kind of feminine mirror to him, which was really Effie coded, but Effie is also pretty Tony coded at the same time. Adam is a lot like Cassie. He's this blonde, quirky guy who is kind of impulsive and unpredictable, with not just a lot of sensitivities, like his sensitivities are all over his wall, the pictures of his ex girlfriend, but he has a lot of sweetness to him as well. Like he is like a masculine part of her. He is a certain part of her. He might even be a mixture of Cassie and Chris. And when Chris leaves, I'm sorry. See, I'm already doing it. When Adam leaves, that's like Cassie having to relive in kind of dream logic the death of Chris, or completely come to terms with the fact that Chris is dead. Like, Chris represented a lot to Cassie. I loved Chris and Cassie's friendship this season. They looked cool together and they had a lot of fun moments. A surprising amount of power came from their interactions. Adam could represent Chris in a large way, considering that Cassie projects onto people and latches onto people in ways that are unhealthy because she's like severely mentally ill. And I think in Chris, she must have seen him as more pure or more innocent or more profound because he wasn't as secretive as the rest, or because he was just more devoted to Jal than anyone was ever devoted to any of their significant others. Like, she saw in Chris something that was clean, which I think is so nice because Chris is the most hopeless and then like the most filthy of them all, but he has this such a large part of it's sweetness, right? I always call these kids like the sweetest kids ever. They're so sweet. Um, you just have to look really hard for it. I think that Chris had was the most obviously sweet out of all of them because he was the most doomed and the most damned, and like the way that Cassie interacts with certain people is really weird sometimes. I think that this fucking season was so great. I really do. The Effie episode, that's my favorite thing. And the fact that the show ended, right? This season ended with all the characters saying their goodbyes. We put a nice little bow on all the different narratives and the characters. But the last thing we see is Effie lying in Tony's bed. Just like when we first, like the first scene in the entire show is Tony lying in his bed, staring vacantly, like into the camera. This is Effie smiling into the camera saying, "My turn now. It's my turn. You ain't seen nothing yet." I'm so happy that Effie is staying on because like all the other I know they're gone. I know they're primarily mostly going to be gone, and we get a whole new group of kids. But Effie's gonna stay. Effie is fascinating, and I'm happy. I'm cool now that I know that Effie will still be around because she does the most interesting things with the narrative systems, and by the most interesting things, she dominates them. She's amazing. And like, you should have seen how excited I was when she looked into the camera again and smiled again. And it's like, oh, here we go. Here we go again, baby. Only better this time. Probably, like, dude, I can't wait. I can't wait, dude. There's so many interesting things going on this season. I think that the character growth is really nice. We got like Maxie has become a lot more complicated and sophisticated, mostly due to the introduction of a new member of the group called Sketch, who I thought Sketch was excellent. Sketch was like so tragic. Sketch was like scary and intense, but full of this sweetness, right? But a dark and twisted and very lonely sort of sweetness. I loved Sketch. The character who was the least defined this season was easily Anwar. Anwar had a lot more to do in the first season. We don't even really, I don't even see him pray this season, which I think is just kind of upsetting that like that the religious notes of the show were completely abandoned, because I thought those are interesting to examine through Anwar. But that's fine. That's fine. Just like Maxie was the least defined in season 1, Anwar is the least defined in season 2. These are short seasons. It's only a 10 episode season. Not everyone can get their huge moment, and Anwar didn't really have one. But man, I loved all these people. They're so good. Jal. Oh my God, Jal. You're amazing. You and Chris, the chemistry, man. The tragedy. And then at Chris's funeral, they celebrate the ultimate misfit with fireworks. I loved it. I deeply appreciated it as well. Skin season 2 was great. Yeah, I think it's extremely good. Season 1 may have the edge, just slightly better than season 2. But season 2 is way more complicated. Like, if we're already this rich, this complex, this early on in the show's run, I can only imagine what the later episodes will be like. Like there's a lot more to analyze and to explore thematically, symbolically in season two, but season one just packed a greater punch. I think that its arcs were more rewarding to interact with. I thought that season two did get maybe overwhelmingly tragic. Like Chris's death was truly overwhelming and exhausting. And it needed to happen. Did it need to happen though? I'm not really sure it needed to happen. I'm not sure that friend group actually needed that kind of like the most severe form of tragedy ever. Also to be done to the character who was deliberately designed to be the most not only sympathetic but pathetic. You know, like your heart can't help but go out to Chris during this entire show, and I think that like killing him like that unceremoniously, and also teasing us with the idea that he almost died and then they let him go from the hospital and then he dies in the very next episode. I think that's an act of cruelty upon the audience to play with our emotions a lot. I think that was like it's powerful, but that's why the reason why it works so well is because it was so like I think maliciously constructed. Like that's a character death that I bet Joss Whedon wished she could have come up with, right? Like Joss is a guy who like to punish not only his characters but the audience. And Chris's death might be the most malicious thing I've ever seen within a teen drama. Like everything about Chris was designed to be mourned, but ultimately Skins kind of redeems itself by changing the mournful and overwhelmingly tragic qualities into overwhelmingly celebratory ones. And as these characters leave the framework of Skins, they leave school, they leave a large part of their youth behind. And I think that Chris was the most freeing kind of conceptualization of 2000s youth, but that had to be killed so that I guess our other characters could mature in a pretty fast and pretty immense sort of way, so they could leave us and we could believe that they've been through something huge. Um, Season two is really 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 excellent. It's just another kind of example of where I wish that I know that British television shows they have like smaller crews, smaller budgets, so we get a shorter season. I also know that British television likes to be quicker and more to the point, more full of substance. But I would have loved for maybe like at least 16 episodes out of a season two, especially with this much tragedy involved, because Chris's death is like the largest tragedy, but every single episode, you honestly feel like you've been through war if you're really engaging and interacting on like the highest possible level, and you relate and you love these kids so much, what they go through and what's going on in their heads and their hearts will destroy you and devastate you. I could have gone for 16 episodes. So we could have kind of allowed these like traumatic events to breathe rather than just piling them on top of us. And maybe that's why I like the episode Effie so much. You know, like there are confrontational things within that episode, but I trust Effie behind the wheel. I trust her designing the narrative, which she is outwardly doing. And you know what, Effie? This was a great work of art, and it was due to her character manipulating and changing the narrative, saving the narrative in the second half of the season. That's so cool to me. Effie is the best character on the show. You know, I can't wait to spend a lot more time with her in the next season, because the comparatively small amount of time that we get with her in seasons one and two, the writers and even like the filmmakers, they are inspired in a completely different way. You know, like they're more daring, they're more artful, like they're incredible. When Effie's there, the philosophy of the show just sings and it makes her smile while she looks at us. That's awesome, dude. That's so cool. But goodbye, I guess this first generation of Skins characters. Wow. Holy fuck. This show is fucking great.